What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to talk about some very important levels to watch for on SPY and how the technicals are looking right now as this thing is continuing to look relatively weak. But before I break anything down about what's going on with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends in just 5 days, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the overall market. So, guys, just as a reminder, I'm not going to be available tomorrow to record any videos because I'm going to be moving to a new place. I'm going to be busy throughout the entire day. So today is going to be my last video, at least for the time being, and then I'm going to be back on Sunday. So just to start off, what happened to the market was we made an attempt to bounce on SPY as I was expecting. I told everyone that we may see a very temporary bounce, and that is what happened to start us off. But this bounce did not really last, and this ended up selling off a bit. I didn't really get a chance to record an intraday video to warn anyone about this. I will be back with more intraday videos next week, starting on Monday. But for now, I wasn't able to do that, and I didn't get a chance to warn everyone as we did break some critical support and the market started to look weaker. So the market began to sell off, but as a result of that, we managed to still try to hold above 430. Now, looking at the overall trend, I would say that the market is still looking more bearish. We're continuing to sell off more and more and more, and we're still due for a bounce as the market is very oversold. However, I believe that the market could sell off a little bit more before we get that bounce. And I still believe it's still like on the table, it's still on the cards, but it's going to take a little bit longer than expected. Now, why is the market looking this way? Well, we're starting to see more capitulation than before, and we're starting to see a lot of sellers continuing to step in and dictate the price action. Looking at SPY, 430 is where our support is. We could see this thing get all the way down to 429 and then make an attempt to bounce off that, if not around 427. One of those is where it should bottom very, very soon. Get a temporary bounce. Not saying it's going to be a big bounce or anything like that. We could see like a dead cat bounce or just an attempt to try to fill the gap that we left up here. And even if we do like kind of, drop a little bit, bounce and try to push towards this gap resistance, if not to the gap fill, then we could always reject and start dropping towards 425 in the future. I still think that could happen as we get very close to the end of September. But remember, once again, we could drop a little bit more, get a bounce, either to gap resistance, if not to fill this gap at 438, then reject and come right back down to 425 to end the month. There is still likely going to be more downside. I'm not saying it's going to be a big bounce or anything like that. There's still downside pending. So watch for this thing to drop a little bit more before we make any attempts to bounce, as we're still looking more bearish. Tesla's looking very weak right now on the daily chart. Tesla made an attempt to bounce, got close to this 257 area, at least yesterday, and today it came very close to that as well, but ended up failing. We were talking about Tesla attempting to bounce and getting a very temporary bounce. We got that initially, but then Tesla started turning. I didn't get a chance to warn everyone about the turn today. I was very busy. I'm very sorry about that, but it is what it is. I will be back for more intraday videos, like I said before, for next week. So for Tesla, we ended up breaking a critical support. I did talk about this support yesterday on the 4-hour time frame. We had to be watching the 20 EMA. The 200 EMA. If that broke, that would be a very bearish signal for Tesla, and we ended up breaking below that, which is once again not good for the bulls. So what's going on with the charts? Just to be clear, we have this imbalance down here, which is around this 237 area. I think Tesla's going to come all the way down to 237. Still looks very bearish. I think it's going to come tanking down to 237 before making attempts to bounce somewhere between 235 to 237. That's my target. I think that there's more downside still pending as it looks weak before we get any kind of bounce on Tesla. The IWM made an attempt to bounce as well, trying to get up to about 178 and rejected, came back down. It did form a bullish divergence, so there's a chance it may bounce soon. We could actually see a bounce as soon as like Monday, but we want to see it try to hold above 176.5. It's always possible for it to drop a little bit more and then get the bounce, so either it drops a little bit more and bounces or it tries to bounce from here. That seems very possible. Aapl right now is kind of flat. The 4-hour is about to turn a little bit more bullish, but I think it's just going to remain stationary for now, trading between 174 and 176. And I think it's just going to go back and forth for an extended period of time. We could see Aapl retest 174 flat, if not like 173.75, very close to that zone, bounce back up and just continue to trade sideways. I think the odds greatly favor that. For the QQQ, we're at support at around this 357 area. If we try to bounce off of this, we could try to make an attempt to get back up to 361, but we failed today. So I'm thinking that it may retest 357. If that fails us, then 354 could come before we get the bounce. My gut is telling me that this thing is just going to remain a little bit weak. It dropped to about 357 thanks to Tesla and other tickers. And then maybe a little bit lower than that before this thing makes an attempt to bounce and get back above 360. My gut tells me that's very probable, and that's likely what's going to happen. Nvidia may drop as well. We're looking not the strongest on the 4-hour time frame. And as we zoom out of the chart, you will see that this thing has been selling off quite a bit, forming a bullish divergence. So it is quite, uh, you could argue it's kind of like oversold, at least to some extent. At least it was temporarily. And I believe that this thing is due to drop a little bit more. We might see it try to fill this gap down here around this 409 to 407 zone. We could be forming like a double bottom and then try to bounce, or we could just fill this gap and then bounce. My guts tells me there's a little bit more downside coming before this thing actually tries to bounce. And we're going to be watching to see if Nvidia could establish a higher low. So watch it basically likely fill this gap first before it tries to bounce. That's going to be on the table, so watch that very carefully. And just for a couple more tickers, I mean, Microsoft is still on a downtrend. It did form a bullish divergence, so there is potential for this thing to try to bounce soon, try to get back above 320. But I'm not sure if it's going to bounce, drop a little bit and then bounce, or if it's just going to bounce from here. Either way, I think that's very probable. It either drops towards 315 and bounces, or it tries to bounce from here. Either way, I find that very, very probable. The VIX actually dropped today. It actually dropped a little bit today, still holding strongly above the 50 moving average and the 50 EMA. It also rejected off this 200 EMA, so we could see the VIX maybe retest this as the market drops a little bit more, then come down and reject just a little bit before the VIX tries to continue to push as we get into the later days of September. The dollar is still holding up quite decently, very indecisive looking, but it's still trying to hold up, so it's not looking the worst. Coinbase is looking relatively weak as this thing came all the way down to 70. It looks very bearish on the daily. We could be seeing this thing hitting the 60s very, very soon. Going to be watching 68 and 66 as two support zones, so watch those very carefully. Coinbase looks more bearish overall. Google, it's very flat right now, hitting 130. If that breaks, 128 is on the table. I could see Google testing 128 if we continue to sell off, and I think that it's very probable we end up hitting 128 to 130 flat. Then we make an attempt to bounce a little bit. We could try to fill this gap or come short, and then we may reject and drop even lower as time goes on. So watch for this thing to drop, bounce, try to fill this gap, and then continue to sell off as time goes on. The 10-year treasury yield is kind of flat right now. It may start dropping a bit, which tends to help the markets, but as of right now, it's not affecting it as much. Looking at Amazon, Amazon is still looking kind of weak, not looking that great for the bulls. We're going to be watching for this thing to potentially come all the way down towards this key support around this 126 area. It looks like it may visit that area before it makes an attempt to bounce. So there could be a little bit more selling on Amazon before we bounce. And finally, for Meta, we managed to close green, but it's kind of flat and we have a bearish looking daily candle. We pumped and came back down, and we may see this thing drop towards 296, which is our 50 EMA. So the market may have more downside coming. It's still looking kind of weak, but there is potential for us to try to bounce a little bit later, around like 427 to 429 for SPY, because we're very, very oversold and the market is due for a slight attempt to bounce. So I'm thinking that it drops a little bit more, tries to get back to either gap resistance around 435, if not 438. And then after that, it may fail and then continue sinking into the 420s. 425 would be on the table after that. So that's my best projection, of the markets. A little bit more downside before we make an attempt to bounce, but it may not be a very strong bounce. It could just be a very temporary one, a dead cat bounce, if you want to call it that, before the market continues to sink lower for the medium term as we get closer to October. That is my view of the markets. It's still looking relatively weak, and we're just going to be very patient for the time being. We're going to be watching to see where the market tries to base, and just know that as of right now, we're continuing to see sellers dictate this market. SPY is looking kind of weak, and so is Tesla. But always keep your calm together, remain calm, cool, and collected, and do what you have to do. All right, I will see you guys on Sunday. I'm going to be unavailable tomorrow. Please take care and do what you have to do. Enjoy the weekend for what it has to offer, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Thank you. Have a great day, and peace out.